Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden, taking a look at tonight's six-game slate over on FanDuel and DraftKings. We're counting down the days here until the All-Star break. You're going to be on a little bit of a minutes limit this week from your Roto World blurb that's above you. What's going on? Just general soreness?
Just general soreness, fatigue, tiredness. Just been a very long season already, and a heavy workload over the past week or so. So, coach is limiting my minutes tonight and probably the rest of the week.
It's glad that we got that news out early, but is it going to be one of those Gary Harris situations where you're probably still going to play 35?
Probably. He said he's going to monitor it, so we'll see how I'm performing throughout the game, but we're going to monitor the minutes and go from there.
All right, we'll play it by ear here. Nice slate tonight, 6 games. New Orleans and Detroit, the first one here, 220 total. Two defenses have been pretty average of late. We got a lot of high-priced studs in this game.
Yeah, there are some pretty hefty price tags on several of these guys, but I think they're all definitely worth those price tags, except maybe Blake Griffin. I think his price tag might be just a little bit too high for tournaments, but everyone in this game is very interesting. I think there's a lot to like about it.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll start with Anthony Davis here. Obviously, the usage rate has been, fairly high. It's been over 27% each of the last 5 games. He's coming off a monster game, as seemingly everyone did in that overtime game against Brooklyn. But I don't mind using Davis here. There are actually a lot of center options on this slate that you can't use, so I feel like he's not a must play, but I don't mind getting some exposure.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have to be afraid of the matchup here. We've seen some of these dominant big men actually just eat up Detroit down low. And I guess I shouldn't say dominant because Dwayne Dedmon is not dominant, but he just demolished the Pistons over the weekend. But this is a matchup that Davis has been fairly solid in over the last few seasons. I'm not going to throw out his average fantasy points against the Pistons because that's heavily skewed by 93.5 DraftKings points performance, but his other games, 49.3, 60, 57.5, 48. So solid production out of Davis here. And obviously you mentioned without Cousins, the usage is still there for him. So I do definitely like him. He had that slate breaking performance in the double overtime game against Brooklyn the other night. But this is still a guy at over 30 fantasy or over 30 field goal attempts in 3 of his last 5 games. That's pretty ridiculous. Rebounding numbers are solid too. So if you want to target him, go for it. I definitely don't think you should be afraid of the matchup here.
No, I don't think so either. When you look at some of these other options here, like Nikola Mirotic and Jrue Holiday, you have any interest?
Yeah, I think everyone from this Pelican side is in play as far as the big name players go. Obviously, the matchup, Mirotic might struggle a little bit trying to defend Blake Griffin, but it's still not a terrible matchup, and he as well had a solid outing last time against the Brooklyn Nets. Playing 49 minutes, of course, but 21 points, 16 rebounds. So that's his second game with the Pelicans that he's had double-digit rebounds. I think he's a fine tournament option. His price is finally up there on DraftKings. He's $7K. Over on FanDuel, he's $7K as well. So if you want to go there, feel free. Detroit does struggle to defend the 3-point line, so you think he might be able to stretch the floor and hit from beyond the arc. Holiday, Rondo, guys that you can use in tournaments, not terribly high on either one. Rondo coming off a big game as well. He's been playing a little bit better lately, but he still has the Rondo factor, so his minutes up and down and a little too inconsistent for me. But he's been over 30 in 2 of his last 3, so definitely worth a tournament shot there.
Yeah, like in GPPs, there's some other guys in cash games that the minutes will be there for in that same price range. So I'll kind of lean towards them. New Orleans has been pretty dwindled down as far as players I want to use. It's basically been 4 guys, the Darius Millers, Ian Clarks, all these other names that have been kind of getting a little bit more run, just haven't really been fantasy viable.
Yeah, Detroit really does struggle against small forwards, so I would like to target one of these Etuan Moores, Darius Millers, and whatnot. But they're, as you mentioned, their minutes sometimes inconsistent. Moore's field goal attempts really going to start to take a hit with Mirotic there, so I'm off those guys.
Yep. Detroit side of things here, you got Drummond, who's at a hefty price tag as well. I mean, the production's been there. Like, we just look at these defensive stats, and it's been phenomenal for him of late. The rebounding numbers are there. It's not a matchup that I'm particularly afraid of. I don't mind getting exposure to Drummond, but there are some cheaper guys still I think I might rather go use.
There are cheaper guys, and I just don't care. Drummond is in my lineups tonight. He's in the tournament article. I'm going with two centers here tonight on DraftKings. I'm just not fading Drummond here. I think people might be scared off the matchup with Anthony Davis, and the fact that that the Pelicans, if you look at least fantasy points allowed, they've started to fall, but they're still only 17th in the NBA. We're talking about a team since DeMarcus Cousins went down. The Pelicans are giving up 52 rebounds per game, 18 second chance points per game, and 49.7 points in the paint per game. The second most rebounds per game to opponents after the Pelicans is like 48 by the Brooklyn Nets. So that's an insane number. Drummond leads the NBA in second chance points at 5.5 per game, sixth in the NBA in points in the paint at 12, and he's second in the NBA in paint touches at 11.7 per game. Usage rate still 25% over the last 6 games with Blake Griffin there. I don't see a reason to fade him here. Like, this is a guy who's over in 3 of what his last 5 games he's paid off that 10K price tag, 4 of his last 5 games. So yeah, just give me all the Drummond here.
Yeah, that sums it up. Let's talk Blake Griffin. You mentioned that price a little bit higher than I think we might like, especially for the production that's kind of evened out of late. He hasn't been over 45 fantasy points since the game against Memphis on the first of the month. We've kind of seen this with Griffin earlier this year, and it brought up a conversation of, does he have that tournament upside when he reaches these prices? And sure, we've seen some upside before. We saw the upside with Griffin against New Orleans last time out, but that was with the Clippers. I don't mind him, but I think there's a couple other options at power forward that I'm going to be looking at instead, just because of that price tag.
I think he's fine for cash. I think he's a pretty safe guy that you can plug in at his price tag. He's 9,500 on DraftKings, 9,200 on FanDuel, and feel pretty comfortable that he's going to get you over 40 points and probably closer to 45, especially in a matchup against a Pelicans team, 25th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games. Griffin does lead the team in usage since coming over. So, I mean, that's pretty promising. So I wouldn't say he doesn't have upside. Like, he could always get there, but I think he's better suited for cash games here.
Yep, I do too. Guys like Reggie Bullock, Stanley Johnson, Ish Smith, cheap guys I don't mind using tonight. I probably prefer Bullock a little bit more over on FanDuel just because he's 1,100 cheaper than Johnson. Ish Smith is interesting. He's not one of those guys. I know he did struggle last time out against Atlanta, which should have been a matchup he should have thrived in. But even with that game included, he's still averaging 31 fantasy points over his last 5 games. At that price, the mids are going to be right around 30 on this slate. New Orleans, not a great defense against point guards. He's that viable cash game option, I think, instead of Rondo.
I guess you could say that. I'm going to get a little bit concerned with Jameer Nelson, Langston Galloway, and the James Ennis's all starting to take minutes away from some of these guys. So I would be a little bit concerned. Nelson played yesterday and played 19 minutes, looked actually pretty solid for this team. So if Smith is struggling, then you could see Nelson start to eat into his minutes. And the same thing goes with the wing players. Bullock played 34 minutes yesterday. It's a back-to-back. Guys that are spot-up shooters tend to struggle a little bit on back-to-back, so I do have a little bit concern there as well. But if you want to roll them out, feel free. But I think I'm just sticking with Drummond and Blake and moving on.
I mean, it was Johnson that took the biggest hit. I don't know what happened. He's the one who only played 20 minutes in that game against Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, we could see him play more tonight, and James Ennis not play as much. I don't think you have to take risks with some of these guys tonight, especially in cash games when there's significantly better options in the same price range across the industry.
Sure. Knicks Philly next one here, 209 total. Knicks side, obviously, we're still dealing with the fallout of Porzingis. We've obviously seen Michael Beasley be the guy who's going to step up in that role. 29, 30 minutes over his last 2 games, 36 and 41 fantasy points. Obviously, the price tag is up. I don't mind going with Beasley here, but I don't really like this Knicks side all that much with Philly's defense of late.
Yeah, it is really tough to consider targeting the Sixers defense because they have been really, really good recently. The plus side is even though these last two games for the Knicks have been just complete blowouts for the most part, like they're still playing Beasley a decent amount of minutes, 31 minutes and a 113-88 loss at Toronto. The Indiana game was closer. They played 29 minutes, but 38 fantasy points in back-to-back games. We know the usage is there for him. We know the production is there for him. At his current price tag, I think you're definitely looking more at cash games just because it's going to be tough to pay off that salary. But on FanDuel, he is just a little bit cheaper, down to 6,500. So I do like him a decent amount. If you want to play him, feel free. I don't mind going there. The rest of this team, though, it's really tough, especially if you're looking at the point guards. I mean, Jarrett Jack got the start yesterday, only played like 8 minutes. Trey Burke played like 8 minutes. They ran a lot of Emmanuel Mudiay and Frank Ntilikina out there, a lot of times sharing the floor together. Both guys are fine options if you really feel like you need to go there. I think I'd rather go with Mudiay just because I think he's going to be playing with a little bit of an edge after being traded from Denver to the Knicks.
Yeah, Moody is interesting. I mean, the price tag is, it's fairly low risk. He's 4,300 on DraftKings. He's 3,700 on FanDuel. 29 minutes last night, 25% usage rate in that game, right around 30 fantasy points. Do I trust it? Not entirely, but I think, I'm in agreement that Moody would be the guy out of those three that I'd, rather use.
Yeah, and he looked pretty solid. Obviously, I don't know, like he wasn't that great in Denver, but like he comes out again with the Knicks and looks pretty good in that first game. I do like his price significantly more on FanDuel where he has 3,700. I think even there, like cash viable because he's probably not going to burn you at that price. So that's probably where I would go with the Knicks backcourt there.
Yeah, outside of that, like I can't get excited about like Tim Hardaway Jr. right now or Courtney Lee. Enes Kanter's been playing really well. I know he had a big game against Philly last time out. I don't know how much I'm going to be going and chasing that. At his price still, it's pretty elevated, but GPPs, if you're building multiple lineups, it's not the worst play. But once again, like I'm just not excited about the Knicks.
No, I'm not really either. And the thing to note with Kanter, and I've said this several times on the podcast, it is a back-to-back for the Knicks. Historically, he has played fewer minutes on back-to-backs. That being said, with no Hernan Gomez there and no Kristaps Porzingis now, that may change. But if you're wanting to get exposure to someone there and you're hoping that Kanter does play fewer minutes, then I would look at Kyle O'Quinn.
And I'm here for the Kanter and Embiid like Twitter and Instagram posts after this game.
that would be awesome. Like I don't know, those two guys kind of remind me a lot of each other with the way they troll and the way they kind of like as they like stand up for the rest of their teammates. So maybe they'll get along. So if you want to chase the Kanter big game, go for it. And I would say that Kyle O'Quinn going up against Joel Embiid, given O'Quinn's let's just say foul problems this over his career, that is a little bit scary.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else on the Knicks you want to talk about?
No, I don't. I think I'm not chasing the Luke Cornett like breakout game or anything like that.
Philly side of things here, we'll start with Joel Embiid, just another high-price center option I think you can use tonight. Once again, one of the higher usage centers in the league, coming off a big game against the Clippers. Usage rate continues to be through the roof for Embiid, and I think in this spot, this is a good one where, we have seen the New York cleaned up a little bit against centers over the last 10 games, but still, I think this is a spot where they're going to struggle pretty much for the rest of the year.
Yeah, when Enes Kanter is your defensive stalwart in the paint, you're going to struggle against opposing big men. So Embiid, at least 50 fantasy points in his last 3 games. It's an excellent spot here for him. I wouldn't necessarily be afraid to roll him out there again, especially against the Knicks team. Even what they had Kristaps on Christmas Day when these teams played, and Embiid still put up 25 and 16. So he is a very high upside option here. I think I'm still going to go with Drummond in tournaments because I think he's going to have a little bit lower ownership, but definitely don't think you should be scared of rolling Embiid out there.
Nope. The other guys here like Ben Simmons, Dario Saric. Simmons has been playing pretty well of late. Price tag at 9K on FanDuel is a little high for me, but I do like his position eligibility and the 8,500 price tag over on DraftKings. I don't mind going that route, but I think his ceiling's a little bit limited here.
I think now that Kristaps is out of there and you don't have that rim protecting presence, I think it definitely helps Simmons in the spot, and obviously his ability to rack up peripherals. And without Kristaps, you're going to be able to get more rebounds and things like that. So I don't necessarily think you can overlook him in tournaments and in cash games. I think he's a safe option across the board. It's definitely a spot where you could see him coming out and putting up a triple double and getting you 50, 55 fantasy points. So I do kind of like him here. And as I mentioned, the lack of rim protection for the Knicks with no Kristaps does make him very, very interesting.
I think JJ Redick's probably the only other one that I have some interest in on tonight's slate. Just at his price, it's decent. We've seen Redick been playing pretty well of late. Knicks, average defense against shooting guards over the last 10 games. He's a guy, if he fits, I don't mind plugging in Redick.
Yeah, I don't mind him here. We saw the Knicks really struggle against him in their last meeting. He played 27 minutes, put up almost 40 fantasy points. They really struggle against spot-up shooters, and as we know, JJ Redick, one of the best spot-up shooters probably in the history of the NBA. So I think you can definitely target him. He's 5,500 on DraftKings. That's a really solid price, and 54 on FanDuel. Shooting guard is pretty loaded today, especially on FanDuel, but I think he's definitely a good tournament option here. And then the rest of these guys, the Sariches and the Covingtons, I don't necessarily mind a sprinkle across some tournament lineups, but I'm not heavily targeting any of them.
Yep, I agree there. Clippers Brooklyn next here, 221 total. Start with this Brooklyn side. DeAndre Jordan is kind of that cheaper option that, definitely going a two-center approach tonight. And I feel like if I'm not paying up for two studs, I'm going to be pretty much mixing in DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah, I basically put in the GPP article, I put Drummond and DeAndre Jordan in there and basically stated that if you're wanting to fade the expensive Andre Drummond on FanDuel, then DeAndre Jordan is an excellent option. Going up against a Brooklyn team that's over the last actually this entire season, I believe they're up to 13 centers that they've allowed to go 6x their salary. That's pretty insane. So they're giving up a boatload of rebounds, points in the paint. They're giving up a league high in blocks to opponents, which we know that's really going to help DeAndre Jordan's value there. I said I'm building around two centers on DraftKings, and it's DeAndre Jordan and Andre Drummond on DraftKings for me.
Yeah, I mean, this matchup doesn't get any better here. You look at Brooklyn, they've struggled against centers all season long. That hasn't changed of late. 30th defensive efficiency, third most fantasy points allowed. They're allowing nearly 20 rebounds per game to opposing centers over that span. This is a potential spot where we could see Jordan lock down, another 20 rebound game, which he did against Philly.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that's really hurt his upside recently was he really struggled from the floor and just as far as shooting goes, and I don't think that's going to be an issue tonight against a Brooklyn team that's allowing opponents to shoot. Let me scroll up here, but I know it's a really, really high number. I think it's close to 47% from the floor, 46.1% from the floor. So, yeah, I think Jordan's not going to struggle to hit his shots, and he's not going to take more than 6, 7, 8 shots. But I mean, if he's able to, 6 or 7 from the floor and get you 12, 14 points, 20 rebounds and a couple blocks, that's a ceiling game from Jordan tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I like this Clippers team quite a bit. I find that their entire starting five is viable here pretty much. Tobias Harris is another one. Brooklyn's a team that does struggle against power forwards. We've seen Harris play really well with the Clippers. He's been over 30 fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games. Usage rate fairly solid as well with the team. I don't mind him at his price. He's a guy I think is just going to get overlooked constantly with the Clippers.
Everybody from the Clippers side of this game is in play except maybe Avery Bradley because, well, he's terrible. Brooklyn, they're on a 5-game losing streak. They're giving up 112.7 points per game during its 5-game winning streak, and they're doing that on 49% shooting and 41.3% from 3-point range. Dating back to January 21st, they're allowing 111.9 points per game on 47.5 shooting and 40% from 3. That's like they're basically their last 10 games. So everybody from the Clippers side of this game is in play. You mentioned Tobias Harris. I like the spot for him. I think I'm leaning a little bit closer to Gallinari, though, just because his ability to get to the line really helps boost his floor. He's shooting the ball a ton. He's shooting pretty well from the floor as well. So I do like Gallinari here. I do like Tobias Harris. Austin Rivers is still really cheap. What is he? 5,400 on DraftKings, and let's see, 51 on FanDuel. I wouldn't be afraid to roll him out. Brooklyn really struggles to defend the pick and roll, and they're let's see, Lou Williams or Austin Rivers, 41.2% of his possessions come on the pick and roll. Lou Williams, 42.5% of his possessions come out of the pick and roll. Both those guys are in play, even though Williams' price is elevated. He's still playing a bunch of minutes. And obviously the usage with Rivers being back is down a little bit, but that's also offset by Blake Griffin and his 30% usage being out of the door. So everybody from the Clippers side of this game in play.
Yeah, Lou Williams, you took prices up over a little bit over on DraftKings. They're about the same. He's only 6,800 on FanDuel. Like, I love Lou Williams on FanDuel tonight at that price.
Yeah, there's a couple options I like a little bit more on FanDuel, but that's a really tough price to fade over there. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bradley. We've been in this Bradley spot before. It's burned into my brain. I think the last time that he played the Nets and he was down at these prices and he was still with Detroit, and it was like, all right, you know what? He can probably go out and get this done. No, he still couldn't. Like, Bradley, there's something up with him this year. I don't know what it is.
I think he's just not motivated to play. But I will say this: he's down to 4,200 on FanDuel. That's ridiculously cheap for a guy that, like, he is a good rebounder. I mean, he has 8 rebounds in back-to-back games. He's not connecting on his shots, but like he's still getting the blocks and steals. So against a Brooklyn team that turns the ball over a lot, I think you can go there in tournaments, but I definitely wouldn't go there in cash.
No. Brooklyn side of things here tonight, liking some exposure to this other side, and I think it pretty clearly starts with Spencer Dinwiddie, who's just been an absolute animal over the last few games. I like him a lot in all formats here, and it's a good spot against this Clippers backcourt that's just not defensively well-rounded.
He's definitely fine. I think I'm definitely not expecting a 51 fantasy point outing from him and 22 field goal attempts, but he's not my favorite member of this Brooklyn backcourt here. I wrote him up in the tournament article. I'm all in on D'Angelo Russell tonight. We saw him go over 32 minutes last game. It was a double overtime game. And I think people are going to look at his minutes and realize it was a double overtime game and be like, oh, well, he only got that many minutes because of the overtimes. He only played like 3 or 4 minutes in overtime. Like, he didn't come into that game like outside of in overtime. He didn't come into like the last 4 minutes of that game, of the double overtime period. So 13 3-point attempts in that contest. He's already like, I can't fade him at his price. 5,600 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel, 18 field goal attempts. Like I said, 13 3-point attempts. The rebound and assist numbers have been solid since he's returned. It's been the scoring. And if he's going to start shooting 38% on 13 3-point attempts against this Clippers team, I'm all in. Just all my chips on the table, all my bankroll, everything D'Angelo Russell tonight.
I mean, this backcourt has been interesting because they've started to play the two together a little bit more, which I think positively helps both of them.
It does, and like it also, like, his usage rate has not taken a hit with spending time with Spencer Dinwiddie. Like, over his last 10 games, 32.5% usage rate. Like, that's still really, really, that's really high. So you're giving me 30 minutes of Russell against a really bad Clippers backcourt defense with 33% usage rate. Yeah. Give me all of it.
Those were kind of the two big guys for me. Like looking at the rest of those guys, like Jared Allen was getting a lot of run, and then only played 17 minutes in that over or double overtime game. Was a little bit concerning for me moving forward.
Yeah, it could have just been a thing where they just didn't want to throw him out there trying to defend Anthony Davis because they didn't want to like break this young guy's confidence. So maybe that had something to do with it. I don't mind taking a shot in tournaments. It's not a bad matchup. Clippers 27th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games against centers. If you want to roll him out, feel free. The same goes with Okafor. Like I think you can maybe give him a shot. His minutes have been way down recently, but I mean, four fouls in 9 minutes against the Pistons. He didn't really see the floor at all against New Orleans. I think I guess they used Mozgov a little bit. No,
AC played a ton of minutes.
AC played 40 minutes. That's funny. I'm not going after AC, but I think Allen is fine in tournaments. DeMario Carroll, you can use in all formats, still playing a ton of minutes, still field goal attempts are there for him, and he's not a guy that's negatively affected by Russell being there.
Nope, I like him as well. Anyone else from Brooklyn?
I don't mind taking a shot on like the Harris and the Crabs and things like that against this Clippers team, but just if Russell's going to start playing more minutes, maybe move into the starting lineup soon, I'm going to be off of those guys.
Yep. Orlando and Chicago next here, 215. Still looking at this Orlando side, I guess they moved Vucevic and Gordon to doubtful. Probably more going to be closer to out again for those two tonight, which we've been dealing with this Orlando, injury situation for quite some time now.
Yeah, I don't know why Orlando would push these guys and roll them out with the All-Star break just being a couple days away. I think Orlando has 2 games left before the All-Star break. Would seem pretty ignorant to roll them out and not just give them the extra rest and whatnot. So I don't think they're going to play, which definitely makes this Orlando team interesting because Chicago's defense has been really, 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 really bad recently. Really bad.
Really. Do you realize how bad it has to be even worse than what they were earlier this year?
Yes, I do. And I mean, almost they're giving up like 112 points per game over the last 10 games. Like that's not good. That's like the 6th highest total. Surprisingly enough, the Warriors are actually giving up more points per game over that stretch, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, I want to target a lot of this Orlando side tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I like this game quite a bit here. We'll start with this Orlando side. We're still dealing with some guys that are obviously going to be playing in the low 30s or high 20s just because the rotation's been still pretty long. Let's start with the backcourt here first. It's, Ben, DJ, Augustine, Shelvin Mack that have picked up the slack. I know Mac obviously had a solid game, last time out against Milwaukee, over 40 fantasy points. I think he's always going to be the tournament pivot to Augustine, I think, in GPPs, if you want to go. But now prices, like, they've kind of closed in on each other. There's not a huge significant difference between the two, at least on FanDuel.
Yeah, DraftKings, there's a little bit of a difference. It's 5,300 and 4,800. As I put in the cheat sheets over the weekend, Augustine's your cash game option, Shelvin Mack's your tournament option. They're no longer, at least in the Milwaukee game, they didn't spend any time playing together on the floor like they had been before. So Mac is strictly backing up Augustine here. But I still think that's the way that you want to go with the two is Augustine in a revenge game, I might add, against Chicago as your cash game option and Mac as your tournament pivot.
And then kind of like going to the Evan Fourniers and Jonathan Simmons and Mario Hezonja's, like, I think Hezonja is probably my favorite out of the three here. You just know the minutes are going to be there. He's been the best producer out of that group over the last, really 10 games. He's been solid. I know you're not a big fan, but he's the guy from Orlando I think I'm getting the most exposure to.
Yeah, I mean, he's fine. Like I've come around and I've been saying that you can roll Hezonja out there if you want to. He's not my favorite option here, though. It's going to be Evan Fournier. I've been waiting since Elfrid got traded away and since Gordon has been injured. I've been waiting for the right moment to pounce on Evan Fournier game, and it's going to happen tonight. It's gonna happen. he's a guy that without Elfrid Payton and without Aaron Gordon on the floor does have like a really high usage rate. It's 28.5%, 1.06 fantasy points per minute. The Chicago Bulls really, really, really struggle against shooting guards. It's one of their weakest defensive positions here. They are giving up the second most fantasy points per game, 44.08 to the position. They also really struggle against spot up shooters. I believe they're the absolute worst defense in the NBA against spot up shooters. I need to double check that. Let's see. But they are giving up. Let's see, where did it go? Guys, I don't know if y'all know, but my notes are like really, really extensive, but okay. They're giving up the second most points per game to spot up shooters, 24.7, and their 24th percentile defense against spot up shooters. Fournier, one of the best spot up shooters in the NBA this season. He ranks 91st percentile among spot up shooters, so averaging like 4 points per game. I'm all in on Evan Fournier tonight. All in.
Bismack Biyombo, starting to come around a little bit more here. Once again, the minutes are just kind of all over the place. And I think on a slate with so many good center options, like I don't think you need to go to Biyombo here.
I think you can do it on DraftKings where you can roll him out at power forward. But on FanDuel where he's center eligible only, it's a hard pass for me. The other guy, like Kim Birch, actually played 24 minutes last game. If he's going to start playing more minutes, I don't mind taking a tournament flyer on him at only 3,700.
Yep, I don't mind it either. Anyone else from Orlando?
Simmons is fine in cash, but yeah, it's mostly Fournier and like the Augustines and Max for me.
Moving over to the Chicago side, we look at Zach LaVine, who's back after over the weekend. Had a huge game against Minnesota. Sat out the Washington game on a back-to-back. He'll be back tonight. LaVine's usage rate continues to be through the roof. And then we look at this Orlando defense, who's been also abysmal against shooting guards this season. The price tag is extremely high on him. Like he's 8,200 on FanDuel. 6,900 on DraftKings. I think DraftKings it's a pretty clear-cut option.
Yeah, I mean, I think on FanDuel, like he's still a clear-cut option. Like this is a guy that you should expect to come out and put up well over 40 fantasy points in this matchup. I mean, I'll take. I know he's 8,200 on FanDuel, but if he gets me 45, 46 fantasy points over there, like I'm very, very happy with that. Like I do expect at least on DraftKings for him to be pretty popular. FanDuel is probably not going to be as popular. But you mentioned, I mean, he's been really, really good lately against the Minnesota Timberwolves. 33 minutes, 12 of 26 from the floor, 46.75 fantasy points. He's been over 20 real points in 4 straight games. Opponents are shooting 47.3% from the floor against the Magic, and they're allowing opponents to shoot 66.5% at the rim, which is where LaVine is attempting a significant 41% of his shots are coming at the rim this season. Yeah, LaVine should absolutely crush the Magic tonight. Like I have 4 guys that are absolute locks in my lineups tonight, and I will have like 100% exposure to it, and it's Russell, LaVine, and Drummond for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to get away from him, and yeah, I don't mind the FanDuel price. It's just like DraftKings, I'm just more locked into it. Like I think he's more of a core in my lineups there than he is over on FanDuel.
Yeah, and just a quick note, Marco Bellinelli, they're expecting him to sign his paperwork and possibly be ready to play for the Sixers tonight. So that's probably going to take the shine off of JJ Redick a little bit.
Yeah. Other guys in the Chicago team, with LaVine out there, like it kind of sucks away some usage from some of these guys, but Lauri Markkanen's interesting still. Like, without Mirotic, we know the minutes are going to be in the 30s. I still don't mind him against a bad rebounding Orlando team and a team that does, once again, if you look at power forwards against them over the course of the season, it gets more middle of the road, but Markkanen's a guy who I think can hurt Orlando here.
Yeah, I think he's a fine option. We know the upside is there. Obviously, I wish his price would come down just a little bit. I mean, he's 6,500 on DraftKings and 6,600 on FanDuel. But as you mentioned, the minutes are going to be there without Mirotic. The usage is solid for him as well. So I don't necessarily mind him there. We have not received word that Dunn is out yet, but I don't expect him to actually suit up. And that's going to help with some of the usage for marketing without Dunn and without Mirotic on the floor, 22.2%, like 1 fantasy point per minute. So if he comes out and puts up, 15, 16 points and, the double digit rebounds should be there for him as well. So you get the double bonus. He's a fine option in all formats. So I do like him. Bobby Portis, you can roll him out there too. My biggest concern is that he's going to break somebody else's face again tonight. Like he's broken 2 players' noses this season already. So, and he got thrown out of last game, out of the Washington game. So obviously a little bit of concern there, but you can roll him out as well. In my notes, I noted that I think Robin Lopez is probably a little bit too cheap for the upside he has. I mean, he's 4,200 on DraftKings. He is 45 on FanDuel, 28 minutes in back-to-back games, 36 against the Clippers. He's definitely a solid, cheap tournament option to consider here.
Yeah, I don't mind him. If Dunn gets officially ruled out, like Jaren Grant's only 5,200 on DraftKings. The minutes continue to be there. He's over 35 minutes in each of the last 4 games. Not going to be the biggest usage guy out there on the court, but I think obviously his floor is still pretty stable for cash games.
Yeah, I like him. I think especially on DraftKings, I think he has tournament upside as well. I mean, 5,200, if he needs 30 fantasy points to get you there, and he's been over 30 in back-to-back games against an Orlando team that really struggles against point guards. What is he averaging? 23 fantasy points in 22 minutes, so over a fantasy point per minute against this team already this season. FanDuel, his price is a little bit higher. He's over 6K over there, but I think he's still a solid cash game option over on FanDuel.
Yep. Anyone else you're interested in? Valentine Holiday at all here?
I guess Valentine would be a little bit interesting. I mean, he's still playing really well, even though he is playing limited minutes at times. I don't necessarily mind going there in tournaments. And Holiday as well. I mean, double-digit field goal attempts in 3 of the last 4. Needs to hit his shots, but at 5K, I mean, 25, 30 fantasy points if his shot starts to fall. I think he could definitely get you there. So both tournament options there.
Yeah, definitely. Like Valentine, the usage rate off the bench here, I mean, 32%, 25%, 25%, 27% over the last 5 games. Usage was a little bit lower when he started against Washington, of course, but it's a guy, he just hasn't really been shooting great. He's had a couple of peripherals. Like he's another one if the shots start to drop, like he's going to be fine.
Yeah, he will. So I like I said, I think I'm always willing to take a shot on him in tournaments, especially at his price tag. Like, I mean, because he is really cheap, 5,500 on FanDuel, 5K on DraftKings. That's pretty cheap for a guy that has the upside.
Yep. Spurs in Utah this next game here, 197 total, by far the lowest on the night. Not an intriguing game with the pace and defenses of these two here.
When I started building my notes last night, I was like, and this was after the LaMarcus Aldridge news came out, I was like, man, I'm fading this game. This game is going to be gross. It's like the line since open has moved down under 200 points. It's down to 196.5. And then I started looking at it and I was like, this might not be as ugly as I originally thought. Like Utah over the last 9 games, averaging 113.2 points per game. They're playing really, really solid basketball. I mean, they're on they're a 9-game winning streak. Like they're blowing people out. I think this game has a little bit more appeal than I originally thought, and it might end up going overlooked a little bit tonight.
I think it goes overlooked a lot because I just think like when you look at this game, like already like the name value is just like, you know what, I don't want to even bother with this. It's 197 total. Like it's the next lowest total is 210. I just think people are going to gravitate towards everything else, especially when we get to this next game and we look at all that. Like, I think this is a great GPP game, not because like they're bad plays and you're hoping that you're getting upside out of them. It's just because they're going to get so overlooked. Like there's going to be a lot of guys that are probably sub 15% ownership here.
Yeah, there really are. And I mean, if we want to start out with the Spurs side of this game, as I mentioned, LaMarcus Aldridge is ruled out. We're still waiting on news on DeJounte Murray and Tony Parker. I would expect Parker to probably suit up and Murray be out here based on just, kind of what Pop has said already. But my interest mostly starts with Pau Gasol. I was all over him the other night whenever these two teams played, and popped me and started Davis Bertans, and Pau Gasol came off the bench. But in that game, Pau Gasol, 20 minutes, 23.75 fantasy points. He had 11 rebounds in 20 minutes. And we're now talking about Pau Gasol without LaMarcus Aldridge. So let's throw this out. Without LaMarcus Aldridge, without DeJounte Murray, without Kawhi Leonard, without Rudy Gay, Pau Gasol, 24.1% usage rate, 1.32 fantasy points per minute. 1.32. And this is a guy that's 4,800 on DraftKings, and he is 5,400 on FanDuel. Yeah, if you're giving me like 28, maybe 30 minutes of Pau Gasol at his 24% usage rate and 1.32 fantasy points per minute in a matchup that people are going to perceive as really, really bad, that's some tournament winning upside right there.
And you look at Utah, I mean, over the last 10 games against centers, 26 in defensive efficiency. They are allowing the seventh most fantasy points per game to opposing centers in that span. I definitely don't mind Gasol here. Like, he's going to get overlooked, and people are probably going to look and go, he probably still won't get a ton of minutes, but like 25 minutes, with the usage that he's potentially going to have tonight, like, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I think, and I've already seen the campaigning on Twitter today for Davis Bertans. Adam Levitan tweeted out that Bertans without LaMarcus Aldridge is averaging 29.8 and 26.7 DraftKings points per minute in 3 games. Powell only 24.8 minutes and 25.9 DraftKings points per game without Aldridge. So I think the crowds are going to sway towards Bertans, which is fine. I think he's definitely a solid option. But like over on DraftKings, there's only there's $500 separating the two on DraftKings, and Pau Gasol is power forward center eligible over there. Like I will definitely lean towards Gasol there. And on FanDuel, I mean, Bertans 3,900. That's pretty much that's easy. That's like a lock and load over on FanDuel.
Yeah. Do you have any interest in anyone else here? Like, Tony Parker sees a really high usage with those guys off. It's nearly 29%, just 0.9 fantasy points per minute, though. I just don't know how his minutes are going to be to really have like a huge effect.
He's fine. I think, let's see, what is his price? He's down to 3,900. I mean, if he gets you 20 minutes, especially at his usage rate with some of these guys off the floor, 29% and almost 100 minutes, 0.92 fantasy points per minute. Like I said, 24 minutes against this Utah team who has not been great against point guards recently. Let's see, what are they? Oh, they're first over now, or our last 10 games, but on the season they are 14th. I don't mind the tournament flyer at that price. That's still really cheap. The guy that I think I would target, though, because Utah really struggles against spot-up shooters, is Manu Ginobili. I'll go back to the Ginobili well here because he's another guy with a really, really high usage rate with all these guys off the floor. 21.1% with no Aldridge and no Murray. If you take Parker out of the equation, assuming he doesn't suit up, 27%, 1.06 fantasy points per minute. And if you take both of those guys off, so no Parker and no Murray, 25%, 0.90 fantasy points per minute. So it's a good spot for him, and he's still really cheap as well.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind Ginobili. Other guys like Danny Green, Kyle Anderson, if guards are out, I mean, are you looking at Patty Mills to say if Parker and Murray both sit?
Probably not. I mean, he's up to 4,500 on DraftKings, and what is he on FanDuel? 4,100. I think I'd still rather go with Moutier here, especially at the right around the same prices. But I think people will probably be off Mills, especially after he burned everyone against the Warriors.
Yeah, sounds about right. That's pretty much it from the Spurs side for me.
Yeah, it's mostly Gasol, Bertans, and maybe Parker if he plays.
Then we look over to Utah. Ricky Rubio, has he been ruled out yet?
No, he's questionable. He did not play last night though, so that might be a solid indicator that they might just end up giving him the night off and letting him rest going into the All-Star break.
Yeah, we saw Royce O'Neal slip into the starting lineup last night for Rubio. Still fairly cheap. Big game. And that he's not a huge usage guy when he jumps into the starting lineup, but 33 minutes of the guy that price, I mean, can do a little bit of everything. I don't mind him here.
I think he's definitely interesting, especially in the spot. I mean, we already saw him last time these teams faced off, like just crush the Spurs. I mean, he played where was it? 32 minutes, 6 or 7 from the floor, 18 points, three steals, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, 38 fantasy points. And this kid is good. Like I understand why they were like Rodney Hood, deuces, dude. Royce O'Neal doesn't have gastric, distress every other game. And he's better than you. So bye-bye. I mean, against Portland, looked outstanding. 2 steals, a block, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 points. Even if he's not in the starting lineup, I mean, he's 3,900 on DraftKings and 4K on FanDuel. Like, the minutes are going to be solid for him there. So I like Royce O'Neal a lot tonight.
Do you like Donovan Mitchell here? We see him pick it up a little bit more with Rubio out. Coming off 2 strong games against Portland and Charlotte. I don't mind him here. Like, his price is pretty fair. It's come up a little bit, but I mean, 7,600 on FanDuel and then, only 7K on DraftKings isn't that bad for the usage here.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried about Mitchell last night because, like, I went in late into the cheat sheets and added him in. Was basically like he's pretty much a solid cash game in tournament option with like a 30 fantasy point floor without Rubio. 24 field goal attempts in that game against Portland, played 37 minutes. He started off really, really slow, and he got really hot in the third quarter and ended up putting up 27 real points. He's a fine option. Obviously, it's not the greatest of matchups against the Spurs, but I think you can definitely go there without Rubio. And then the rest of the guys, the Joe Ingles, you can definitely look at him as well. I mean, he's been playing like out of his mind recently, had 38 fantasy points against Charlotte, 36 against New Orleans, 42 last night. Some of the offensive load will fall on him without Rubio on the floor. So I really like O'Neal. I like Mitchell if Rubio is out, and I like Ingles if Rubio is out.
Yeah, I do too. And I think with O'Neal right there, like, you don't have to go and chase like Jay Crowder.
You don't have to, but I think you can. Like, I don't necessarily think this is a spot where you have to be afraid of Crowder. Like, this isn't Crowder in Cleveland anymore. Like, he actually looked really solid in Utah. Rebounds are up. The shooting was up. Like, he came out and was like, I'm really happy to be playing with these guys, and I'm really happy to be playing in a system again. He admitted that he's a system player and he is better in a system, and Utah has one of the best systems in the NBA. So I don't think you have to be afraid of chasing the spot for Crowder.
This is a NBA. This is a weird time because drama is kind of leaving the air. Like, everyone's getting together. Everyone's playing well all of a sudden. Like, what's happening? Like, I miss the chaos.
Don't worry. There will be chaos. I'm sure there will be something tonight.
Front court guys here, you have any interest with like Favors or Gobert?
You can sprinkle in some Favors and Gobert in tournaments. I think Favors is the way that I would lean just because he's the cheaper option across the industry. Like 5,500 on FanDuel, 5,100 on DraftKings. Like, that's a pretty solid cash game option right there.
Yep. Last game of the night, Phoenix and Golden State, 232 over under. Golden State favored by 15. What's potentially nice about this Phoenix side tonight is it doesn't matter with some of these guys if they lose by 5 or if they lose by 50, like they're still going to get their minutes.
Yeah, I would like to get the news that Booker and Ulis are actually confirmed out. I don't think they're going to play, but hopefully Scott can get us that information early on in the afternoon, because there is a lot to like about this Phoenix side of this game. I think this game is going to be incredibly chalky and incredibly popular, so there's ways that you can get around that without necessarily fading everybody from this matchup, but Phoenix is in a good spot here. Like I mentioned, Golden State's been really bad recently. Over the last 10 games, they're one of the worst defenses in the NBA. They're giving up 112.7 points per game, and their best defender, Draymond Green, is probably not going to play. So that may make this a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, we just seen Golden State, really struggle on defense, and it's probably because they're a little bit tired. We've seen Kerr come out and say like they just want to get to the All-Star break. They're mentally drained. You got Draymond Green, who's just getting ejected for fun nowadays, and it's all fun and good in Golden State. Like this is nothing to them.
Yeah, like I'm frustrated with Draymond Green because he's like, I don't know what to do anymore. They're targeting me and blah blah blah. They're just picking on me. Dude, you brought it on yourself. Don't try to play the victim card. Like you brought like all this hate from the referees on yourself. Like I don't feel bad for him. Like, yes, a lot of these calls are really bad, but like if you didn't act the way that you did like over the past few seasons, it wouldn't be this bad. So quit trying to be a victim.
Phoenix, let's start with Elfrid Payton here. Played 35 minutes in his Phoenix debut against Denver. 21% usage rate in that game, put up over 30 fantasy points. I think the minutes are going to be fairly stable for Payton, even with if Booker comes back. I obviously would like Payton more if Booker sits. Fair price on him tonight. We look at Golden State. I mean, over the last 10 games against point guards, are 23rd in defensive efficiency. They're middle of their own fantasy points allowed. I don't mind Payton here.
Yeah, I like him in tournaments. I'm probably not going to go there in cash because I think there's definitely better options. But as I've said countless times, Payton's he has triple double up the upside every single time he takes the floor. I was a little worried the other night because after the first quarter he had a 9% usage rate, and I was like, well, this isn't going very well. But he ended up bouncing back and having a solid game. I think if you want to go there, feel free, especially if Booker is out. That'll definitely help him. But I think the unstated part of this is how having Elfrid Payton there benefits the rest of this team. Like we saw Warren actually play really well. It didn't hurt Josh Jackson. Josh Jackson's still eating up a ton of usage and a ton of field goal attempts. It helped Dragon Bender. I think Elfrid being there helps the team as far as spreading the floor and actually having a somewhat viable point guard on the floor. So I mentioned Jackson. I still don't want to fade him at that price. 6,200 on DraftKings. He is where is he on FanDuel? 6,800. It's still a solid price for a guy that's attempting 17, 18, 19 shots every game, and the rebounds and the assists and the steals and the blocks are there. He's still got a massive ceiling. He's still got 45, 50 fantasy point ceiling, especially in a paced up game like this.
Yeah, Josh Jackson's the guy that I'm getting a ton of exposure to tonight. I don't mind TJ Warren. He's a little bit close in price with Jackson. I prefer Jackson quite a bit, but I don't mind if you're building a ton of lineups to sprinkle in some Warren as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I mentioned the pace with Elfrid Payton, and I'm scrolling up to grab the other numbers. They played at a 103.8 pace in their last game against Denver. That's if their season average is 102.9, so they're playing just even a little bit faster. And that's really good for guys like Jackson who thrive, especially in transition. So I really like him here. And you mentioned Warren. I think he's still a solid cash game option, and he's still a solid tournament option, especially at his price. With Elfrid there, like I said, it allows someone else to initiate some of the offense and lets him operate a little bit freely. And against a Warriors team that doesn't have Draymond Green and is a not great at rebounding, not great at keeping opponents off the glass. I think this is a spot where Warren could actually have one of his solid rebounding games as well.
Yep. When you look at the front court here, Tyson Chandler due back tonight. I don't think that hurts Bender too much here. Like, I still think he's going to get his, 25, 30 minutes. Price has obviously come up a little bit after that big 45 fantasy point game against Denver. I like him here. I mean, you mentioned the rebounds. They should be there for him tonight. I do think this is a spot where he can play well in. He's going to be a guy that's interesting, especially on FanDuel, like at 4,900. He's a cheap power forward option you can consider.
Yeah, I like him here, and I feel like every time I'm like, oh, this is a great Marquise Chris spot, Dragon Bender goes off. And every time I'm like, this is a great Dragon Bender spot, Marquise Chris goes off. So feel free to take a shot on either one. I think I'm leaning Bender just because he doesn't necessarily have the foul trouble. And even with Tyson Chandler possibly being back or probably being back, that doesn't mean that Chandler is going to start. Like, Bender has started over, I think he started over Chandler a couple games ago. And the minutes, obviously you mentioned the minutes are going to be there, the upside's there, and it's an excellent matchup. Again, without Draymond Green, they're going to be a little bit worse on the interior, and their rebounding numbers probably going to take a little bit of a hit. I think this is an upside spot for both guys, but I'm going to lean Bender just because he doesn't, get in foul trouble.
Yeah, and if you GPP pivots, like if you want the lower owned here, I think Chris would obviously be that guy.
Yeah, for sure. Like, they're all in play, and even if you wanted to use both of them, I think you could get away with using both guys if you really, really wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we mentioned this game going to be chalky. I think Warren and Chris are probably the two lower-owned Suns plays.
Yeah, probably either that or like Troy Daniels, and I think you can take a tournament shot on him. He made it into the starting lineup last game, I believe, over the weekend. Didn't do very well, but he's just another guy that you could maybe roll out, and I mean, field goal attempts are there for him. He just has to hit those shots, but if he hits those shots and gets hot from the floor, you're looking at a guy with 20 plus fantasy point upside.
Yep. Then we get to the Golden State side of things here. With Draymond, doubtful for tonight's game. Jordan Bell still out. We see guys have a little bit higher usage. Curry takes a 3% usage bump. Durant does as well. I think you can start with those guys here. Like, I think you can build around them tonight. But I really like Klay Thompson at that price.
I like everybody at their prices. I mean, we're talking about Golden State guys. Durant on DraftKings under 10K. He is 10.9 on FanDuel. It's a little high, but Curry's 10.2. He's under 10K on DraftKings as well. Against a Suns team that not great at defending the 3-point line. They've been better of late, but they're still not great. And Curry, let's see, last season in 3 games, averaged 32.8 points with a high of 42, and Golden State's 4 wins over the Suns last season. Like you mentioned, the usage that is there for him, like his production doesn't necessarily go up too much. I mean, it's like 1.43 fantasy points per minute. He's 1.43 on the season. So like that part doesn't go up, but the usage is solid. I don't mind taking a shot on either one of those guys. And you mentioned Klay, 26% usage rate, almost a fantasy point per minute without Draymond on the floor. He's another solid tournament option that you can go with to get exposure to this Golden State side of this game.
Yeah, and like we don't need to talk too much about the Phoenix defense. Like, they struggle. Like, we know Golden State's going to come out and probably drop 120 points tonight. They could rest Durant and they'd probably still drop like 115. I like the big 3 here. You're doing with anything of the value guys. Like, David West has quietly been playing really, really well over the last few games. I wouldn't expect him to see a huge minutes bump, but he's an interesting name to kind of keep an eye on.
He will not see a minutes bump at all. Like, Kerr will not play him. He only plays him in like the second and the fourth quarters. That's it. Like, he will not play him any more minutes than like 16 or 17. And it's just he just has to do his production, like his usage and all that stuff is going to have to come in those limited minutes. But I mean, 21, 33, 20 fantasy points over his last 3 games, rebound scoring's there. So I think you can look at him. Kevon Looney probably gets the bulk of the run. We saw, was it the Chicago game when Jordan Bell like broke his ankle or whatever, and Draymond Green was out and Kevon Looney got the bulk of the minutes. They didn't go to Caspi, but You could take a shot on Looney. He's not very good and he doesn't do a bunch, but like the minutes should probably be there for him. And the same thing goes for Caspi. Like if Kerr gets a wild hair up his butt and is like, I'm gonna roll out Aubrey Caspi, like you can take a shot there. And even Iguodala, like all those guys are in play, but I don't know that I want to try to target the ceiling game out of either one of them.
Yeah, I mean, usually when we get a rest day for or injury, I guess, whatever you want to call it, it's usually just kind of the big guys for me. It's different because we always had Jordan Bell to just kind of plug in when Draymond sat, and that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, and it really sucks because I wish I could roll out some cash considerations in this spot, but definitely can't do that tonight.
No. Do you have a preference between Curry and Durant if you're picking one?
Curry and tournaments, Durant and cash. Durant, it's the stability. Like he does everything. Like he gets the blocks, the steals, the rebounds, the assists, and I think that makes him a more solid like cash game all around option.
Yep, I agree with you there. Let's go highest score tonight. There's plenty of options.
Stephen Curry.
I was thinking he's probably going to pick like someone else. Like there's no way. But no. Let's see here. Let's see. I'll go Davis. I think Davis is obviously the probably next best choice here.
Solid choice. And one quick disclaimer before we get out of here. As I mentioned, and I wrote about it in the GPP article, but with the All-Star break being just a couple of days away, just be on the lookout for any indication that guys might rest. Teams do use this week to kind of roll some weird lineups out and rest some guys, given that they have an entire week off. So just be weary that there could be a phantom injury or phantom rest, especially after lock.
Yeah, I think Wednesday is probably the biggest day for that, would be my guess.
Yeah, and I don't have the Wednesday schedule pulled up at right now, but there's 14 games, so that's 2 teams that aren't playing on Wednesday. Those 2 teams, this might be like the last day for them to play. My guess is it's probably the Nuggets, Bucks, Lakers, and Timberwolves since they play on that Thursday. But yeah, just be weary of phantom rest.
Yes, but the Warriors play on Wednesday. I would expect kind of like one of Curry or Durant to sit out, maybe Green to pop back in.
Probably all of them.
Or all of them. That'd be fun. So that's it for us. You can enter DaveFantasyCafe.com. You can check out Brent's GPP article, cheat sheets, and the optimizer as always. And good luck tonight, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Good luck.